Hey guys, welcome to Through the Bible Verse by Verse, a plain and simple study of the entire Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. We are in 2 Kings chapter 5, another fascinating chapter out of the Old Testament. This is the story of Naaman. Now Naaman, as we will see, is not an Israelite. And yet he will exemplify such great faith, even greater than the Israelites. Now, what is interesting about Naaman, there are two that I can think of right off my top of my head. Two Gentiles. I'll take that back. Three off the top of my head that I can think of. Who is credited. Now, Jesus dealt with two of them. There was the woman from Phoenicia. I know I butchered that name, excuse me. And then there was the centurion, right? Roman centurion. And in both cases, Jesus says to them, I have not seen great faith, or you have great faith. Naaman also is going to exemplify this great faith. Now, this is a fascinating story because of how Naaman gets there. But it is interesting that you see these great people who hear of the God of Israel, and then they turn to him, right? And they turn to him based upon the testimony. And that's what we're going to see with this. This is a story of faith. See, a story of faith. And again, what I'm going to say, how the faith process works. Now, there, in other words, in general, how we come to faith. The message is preached to us. We respond to it. Now, that's the message of faith in essence. Now, what's behind a lot of that, for sure we can talk about, right? God obviously acting upon our hearts. God orchestrating, this message of faith in our hearts. Okay, so yes, all of the above. But it is interesting that you see that people respond to. And so Naaman is very interesting. Let's get into Naaman. Very interesting story of faith here. All right, verse 1 says, Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Aram. Now, we're going to see this very interesting because in the next chapter they get into a big war. The Arameans, I don't know how you want to pronounce it. But anyway, so that's what I'm saying. What's interesting about this, we see in the next chapter that they get into a war. All right. Anyway, Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Aram, was a great man in his master's sight and highly regarded because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. And the man was a brave warrior, but he had a skin disease. Now, of course, I'm using the Holman Christian Standard Bible. If you're using pretty much any other translations, where they will use, say, leprosy. Okay. Verse 2, Aram had gone on raids and brought back from the land of Israel a young girl who served Naaman's wife. Now remember, that's the way slavery is. In the last chapter we saw indenture slavery. Here you see what typical slavery is. If you got conquered, you pretty much were someone's slave. Verse 3. So now, and this is, by the way, she came from the land of Israel. Now, just keep in mind the political and spiritual times of Israel. Exceedingly wicked. This is why Israel would be conquered, and they wasn't at their best, and they're not winning and all that. Okay. Verse 3, she said to her mistress, if only my master would go to the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his skin disease. Now, one other thing, notice that this woman, this Israelite, was conquered and was a slave, and she knows about Elisha. That's just interesting there. Verse 7, so Naaman went and told his master what the girl from the land of Israel had said. Therefore the king of Aram said, go, and I will send a letter with you to the king of Israel. So he went and took with him 750 pounds of silver and 150 pounds of gold and 10 changes of clothing. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, and it read. Now notice this payment, right, came to the king. When this letter comes to you, note that I have sent you my servant Naaman, for you to cure him of his skin disease. Verse 7. When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and asked, am I God, killing and giving life, that this man expects me to cure this man of his skin disease? Think it over, and you will see that he is only picking a fight with me. So now, the communications, of course, got messed up here. So the king wrote and said, hey, cure my servant, when he probably should have said, I hear there's a prophet that is among you. Cure my servant. Verse 8, when Elisha the man of God heard that the king of Israel tore his clothes, he sent a message to the king, why have you torn your clothes? Have him come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel. So we see right here God's motive. Verse 9, so Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stood at the door of Elisha's house. Then Elisha sent him a messenger who said, go wash 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be clean. Simple instructions. Go wash 7 times in the Jordan. Okay, verse 11. But Naaman got angry and left, saying, I was telling myself he would surely come out and stand and call on the name of Yahweh his God, and will wave his hand over the spot and cure the skin disease. Aren't Abana and Pharpar and the rivers of Damascus better than all these waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and left in a rage. Now, it's kind of interesting. His expectation, right? His thought process was he was expecting the man of God to come out and do some big the word I'm looking for here, hocus pocus type of thing. That's not the word I'm looking for, but he expected him to come out and wave his hands. Now, I can't help but think about this, guys. When you watch some of these fake healers on TV, and they do exactly what he's expecting. They come out and they do this, and there's this one guy that used to be like, heal in the name of Jesus, heal in the name. So he's expecting hoopla like that, pomp and hoopla, right? And then on top of that, the prophet tells them to go wash in the Jordan, and you can see the kind of esteem he had for the river of the Jordan. Dirty, they're not much cleaner. Look, I'm an esteemed man right here. Verse 13. But his servants approached him and said, my father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more should you do it when he tells you, wash and be clean? Why are you tripping? If he told you to go and wait, but that's true. Some of these fake healers will come out and have people do all kinds of crazy stuff. Verse 14, so Naaman went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, according to the command of the man of God, and his skin was restored. It became like the skin of a small boy, and he was clean. So very smooth skin, right? He came out, man, the Naaman and his whole army and his whole company went back to the man of God and stood before him and declared, I know there is no God in the whole world except Israel. Therefore, please accept a gift from your servant. Now, you remember he came with these gifts from the king, and now notice he's now offering a gift. But I want you to keep this in mind here, because this kind of displays later on in the story. Verse 16, but Elisha said, as the Lord lives, I stand before him, I will not accept it. And Naaman urged him to accept it, but he refused. Now, really keep this in mind, because notice that Naaman what? Are you crazy? Take the man's gift. Take his money. Verse 17. And by the way, let me just poke fun at something. A number of years ago, when I say a number of years ago, I'm a little older, so I can remember some of these things. I was alive, of course. There was a fake healer. He's now passed away. There's a university he started in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and this the university got into trouble, and he came out with this claim that God told him that if he didn't raise money to pay for this university, he was going to call him home. Yeah, he was a fake healer and all that. Now, as it turns out, what was interesting about this was I think some kind of gambler, it was the one that ended up giving him $1 million. And I think that was the figure that God told him he needed to come up with, or God was going to kill him and take him home. Now, I'm saying that because I want you to see here Naaman. Okay? I want you to see that Naaman urged him, but he would refuse. All right, verse 17. Naaman responded, if not, please let your servant be given as much soil as a pair of mules can carry, for your servant will no longer offer. No, I'm sorry. Naaman responded, if not, please let your servant be given as much soil as a pair of mules can carry, for your servant will no longer offer burnt offering or sacrifice to any other god but Yahweh. Now, this is kind of interesting here. This story here. Verse 18. However, in a particular matter, may the Lord pardon your servant when my master the king of Aram goes into the temple of Raman to worship, and I, as his right-hand man, bow in the temple of Raman. When I bow in the temple of Raman, may the Lord pardon your servant in this matter. So he said, go in peace. Now, the reason why I wanted to bring this up, because this is very interesting, especially when we talk about people who are not Christians, or I should put it like this way, when we talk about we as Christians having to sometimes operate in the world. In other words, this man has truly come to faith, and he's telling them that I'm not going to offer burnt offerings. However, because of my duties, I have to escort my king, and he goes into the pagan gods, and as we enter in the temple, we bow. Now, it's interesting. Notice his response, go in peace. That in the surface worth kind of a noteworthy. Now, I'm not saying that we should always, if possible, if we can get out of pagan practices, right? So, for example, I don't know if a woman, if you say, okay, I'm a Christian woman, but the only way I can make money is to work in the strip club. Well, we know that's not true. The temptation of that is great money, but no, you don't have to be a prostitute. You don't have to sell drugs, be in a gang. You don't have to do any of those things to make money. So that's not what I'm talking about right here. And of course, in this particular case here with Naaman, he had no choice. And remember, everybody didn't have a Christian kind of a background here. He didn't have a choice. He had to follow those practices. What this tells us is this. Remember, this is a good example of understanding that the biblical narrative, the Old Testament narrative, is God as he's dealing with his people, not outside of Israel. And that's important to understand here. God wasn't dealing with them. They did not have the commands of God. So this man turned to the true and living God. I'm going to say more so than the Israelites. And this man was conscious of the fact that there's certain things I have to do that I know doesn't pay homage to the true and living God, who I now embrace. And God wasn't condemning him for that. And I say that because there are people who would tell you things that they themselves don't have to. Like, for example, there are people that tell you, well, you should homeschool your kids. Well, that's fine if you're a husband and you are making money enough to where you can afford that. You don't have to, if you have to work. I mean, we can go on and on and on with this. I'm really going to get off. But this is a good example of a lot of this when people tell you stuff in the name of God. Okay? That God himself is not telling you. All right. Verse 19. So he said to him, go in peace. After Naaman had traveled a short distance from Elijah, Gehazi, now remember him, the attendant of Elijah, the man of God, thought, my master let this Aramean Naaman off lightly by not accepting from him what he bought. As the Lord live, I will run after him and get something for him. Greedy now. He's greedy. Look at all this. This thing is bothering Naaman. He's bothering Naaman, right? He's thinking, oh my God, my master's messed up, man, not getting all this money. All right, let me get back to here. Where am I at? Ooh. Okay, so verse 21. So Gehazi pursued Naaman, and when Naaman saw someone running after him, he got down from his chariot to meet him and asked, is everything okay? Gehazi said, it is all right. My master has sent me to say, I have just now discovered that 2 young men from the sons of the prophet have come to me from the hill country of Ephraim. Please give them 75 pounds of silver and 2 changes of gold. Now, why do they need this, Naaman? Okay, anyway, but Naaman insisted. Please, accept 150 pounds. And he urged Gehazi and then packed 150 pounds of silver in 2 bags with the 2 change of clothes. And Naaman gave them to the 2 of his young men who carried them ahead of Gehazi. Now, interesting, right? Gehazi was like, oh man, this is better than I thought. I came for 75 and I'm leaving double with double. 150 pounds? Wow. Verse 24. And what's interesting too, notice that here Gehazi comes in the name of the prophet. Right? Now, Naaman doesn't know the difference. And so Naaman gives it to him. Verse 24, when Gehazi came to the hill, he took the gifts from them and stored them in the house. Then he dismissed the men and they left. Gehazi came and stood by his master. Where did you go, Gehazi? Elijah asked him. Your servant didn't go anywhere, he replied. But Elijah questioned him. Wasn't my spirit there when the man got down from his chariot to meet you? Is it the time to accept money and clothes, olives, orchards, vineyards, sheep, and oxen, and male and female slaves? Therefore, Naaman's skin disease will cling to you and your descendants forever. So Gehazi went out from the presence, disease, white as snow. In other words, he lost his job. Right? Worse, notice he went out white as snow. Now, if you would note, he still has the money, but what a price to pay for lying. In other words, you kind of have to stop and think, did he not learn anything from being in the presence of the true prophet of God? I mean, we talk about the sinful nature of man that's threaded through the entire Bible. Here is Gehazi, who was servant to the true prophet of God. He remember all of the signs that he saw, being Elisha's personal servant. And then he does this. And then on top of that, lies. Now, he loses his job, right? So that's the first thing. Worse, he is a leper, and leprosy was a horrible disease. We can cure it today, but there was no cure then. And when we think about monkeypox today, because it's curable, but back then they didn't have it. You were ostracized because it was a disease that, again, it spread through touch. So that's worse. Then he lost his job, but he had this money. The question is, was it worth that money? Alright guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP the Bible Perspective. Hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to add your comment. All comments are welcome. See you in the next study.